Hamilton, Ohio, is a cozy Midwestern town with a spectacularly spooky supernatural side. Poltergeists play while ghosts glide down Dayton Lane as we talk with our guest tonight, author Shi O'Neill of Haunted Hamilton, Ohio. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents the Hometown Haunts podcast. I am your host, Kat Loco, and tonight with me in the shadows, as always, is Jen Kohler and Christina Wald. We'll have them out a little bit later. You can follow us on social media at Cin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and we love to hear your hometown haunts. So please send them and share them to our hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. I'm waiting. I'm dying to hear them. Also, you can join our Facebook group at Hometown Haunts, and that's a nice gathering place for everyone who is a member of our group to talk about and who listen to this podcast to share their own fun news and also hometown haunts. And we also put out calls for, hey, we would like to hear ghost stories about XYZ, or following last week's episode, we love to hear what your hometown food is. Mine is Dingus Day sausages. So, surprise, Cat's not from here. Also, we're an official podcast that can be heard on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and SoundCloud. You can find us by searching Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities. Please rate and review us so other spooky and weird history lovers just like you can find us. Of course, links are in the show notes. Christina would like me to remind you that our Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Issue 2, Trail, Trains, and Terror, our Kickstarter is closed, but we are completely funded. However, if you missed the Kickstarter and would still love to have a copy, you can pre-order your copies from our website, and of course, the link to that is in our show notes. Also, this is our final episode of Season 2. We are taking a holiday break and we will be back in January, and hopefully we'll have the possible topics for Issue 3 of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Comics Anthology. It's all very exciting, and we hope that you have a wonderful holiday season. And now on to the rest of our show. So, our guest tonight is Shi O'Neill, who is a retired teacher and an avid reader who loves to immerse herself in a good story. She lives in a close-knit historic neighborhood in a small Ohio town that serves as her inspiration. Her first work, a novel, was based on her experiences in the historic district where she has lived for a quarter of a century. She serves on multiple historic boards, which augments her love of history. She has raised 2 beautiful children and has lived with her loving husband for the last 25 years in a 19th-century 3-story mansion. Although Shi has been writing for many years just for the love of it, she is now publishing her work, and we're talking about that tonight. It is Haunted Hamilton, Ohio, part of the Haunted America book series. So, without further ado, I will add Shi.
Hi.
Hi! Welcome to the show. Here. There we
Thank
go.
you. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. We got to meet a few weeks ago, months ago now, at the Benninghoffen House that is also the Butler County Historical Society, and it was wonderful.
It was one of my favorite places.
Yeah, it's I never been there before. It was all new to me, and I love it. I recognized a lot of the antiques from stuff my family had, so it was fun going through. Now, did you ghost hunt that night, or were you just there rubbing elbows with the director?
I didn't that night because we had the world's largest ghost hunt that night, and I was going from one spot to another.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the second place on my itinerary. But I did go back for, when was that? It was on the 30th of October for a ghost hunt. That was really...
Did anything happen?
Well, not that I could prove, but the equipment showed that something was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and they had it set up for a funeral,
Oh, yeah.
and some things happened earlier in the day when we weren't having the ghost hunt that they
Mm-hmm.
pointed out to us, and very interesting. So
Was Wilhelmina around?
Wilhelmina was there,
She's
and
always there.
she she was. We didn't call on her actually, but she made her presence known,
Yeah.
and her image showed up on, is it the SLS camera? You would be
Yeah.
familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Yeah, the SLS camera. She didn't show up for the SLS when we were there. Christina and I went also for the largest ghost hunt. I believe that was September 26th of this year. And we had a small boy that was showing up at the bottom of the staircase. But we didn't see her though. When Christina and I were doing a dowsing rod session in the front parlor,
Mhm.
Wilhelmina was very much there, and as was the little haunted baby doll. So
Yes. Yeah.
that was that was fascinating. Just that artifact being so haunted.
Caroline
Caroline.
is what they called her. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and then they had the casket. Yes, the casket, the woven casket that was made specifically for this display, which I was like,
Mhm.
man, that's special. So yeah, and I am actually interested in how did you write for? Oh, I'm sorry, which publishing? I'm sorry, publishing house. This is Haunted America, History
Right.
Press.
Right.
Yeah. How did you get the book? I'm always interested as a fellow author how people got their proposals in.
Well, I didn't seek them out.
Hmm.
I wrote Millionaire's Row and published it about 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's about my house.
Oh,
Um,
I remember you had it for sale.
yes. And so I wrote Millionaire's Row. It took me about 8 years, and I published it finally about 3 years ago. And um, the gentleman from Haunted Press
Hmm.
read the information about the ghost walk on our website, on the
Hmm.
Dayton Lane Historic Society website, and contacted one of the board members to see if there was someone that would be willing to write the book. So he contacted me, um, really, I think because I'd already published one about the district, to see if I would be interested in writing one for History Press.
Hmm.
And I didn't say yes right away. I really had to think about it, because I write for the love of writing,
Hmm.
and I have to really go to that place. I kind of zone if I'm really interested in a topic. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Hmm.
And it kind of takes over, and then this I become part of the story, and then I put it on paper, and that's the kind of writer I am. And there were very specifics for writing a book for them. I just
Hmm.
wasn't sure that I was ready to write a nonfiction on a subject that I can't prove.
Yes, that is very tricky.
Yeah.
It's a fine line you're balancing the entire time because you're talking like you're doing all the so I'm an anthropologist by training. So when I'm writing my books, they're like anthropology deep dives into all the history, and then I talk to people who have encountered the ghosts. So
Mhm.
I'm walking this line of history, you're researching it and you're finding all the facts, and then you worked with Victor Peruta,
Right.
and yeah, and I got the name right, correct? Victor
That's
Peruta.
right, Victor
Yeah,
Peruta.
yeah, and yeah, when you're working with psychic mediums, you're listening to their experience with the dead, and you're just sitting there going, okay, Yeah, but when it corresponds with history, that's when things start to sparkle a bit, and you're
Right.
writing that in a book. Yeah.
And that's the approach I took. I
Mhm.
tried to be objective. Um, I don't have any hard proof. I have personal experiences that changed my perspective on the subject,
Mhm.
but I don't have any hard evidence that I'd be willing to put in a nonfiction book.
Mhm.
So I also interviewed and had the stories from a variety of people and researched the history that could possibly validate
Mhm.
the authenticity of that.
Mhm.
And that's the approach that I took for the book.
Mhm.
I will
Yeah.
say, I will say at the Benninghofen house, there's so many things going on there, and and a lot of spirits there that it's kind of hard to believe, honestly.
It's a lot because when when you're a paranormal investigator, you're expecting like maybe one, perhaps two, but having an entire house full is just quite remarkable, and they're also chatty.
Right. And what convinced me that um, it was an authentic experience is Kathy Crichton allowed me to ask the questions with the dowsing rods. And
Mm-hmm.
I know I didn't move those rods,
Yeah.
but they did move. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of hard to deny that something was going on.
Yeah, it always is the personal experience that changes minds. And I love Kathy because it's I'm going to be blunt. It's pretty rare to find somebody who runs historical society who is this into ghosts and the paranormal.
Yeah.
It's refreshing. I love it because it's a great way of connecting to the community and it always piques people's interest and it's
Yeah.
keeping history alive in
Well,
kind of an undead way.
that's true. It brings in people who probably wouldn't normally visit the museum or her activities, and it's very educational.
Mhm.
And they're going there, for, to see a ghost, and they're actually learning quite a bit about the history of our
Yeah.
town.
Yeah, it's I want to talk more about Benninghofen, but first I want to get you mentioned a few paranormal experiences you had back that include a wine glass and a Ouija board. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Would you be interested in sharing that story with our listeners?
sure. This was my first encounter, really, um, with anything paranormal. And there were six of us, and we had planned to go see The Exorcist at a local theater. And it was just before Christmas. And it was
Mhm.
a Christmas that the weather was really warm. We had thunderstorms. And so, unfortunately, we got to the theater and the power was out in that whole Tri County area,
Oh man.
which included the theater. So, we went back to my apartment, the six of us, and we decided to go to the midnight show then. It was the opening night for The Exorcist. And while
Ooh.
we waited just to get in the mood, we created our own Ouija board on the dining room table by putting the letters, numbers, yes and no on sticky notes and putting them around this large dining room table and overturned a wine glass. And that was our blankets. And we put our fingers on the wine glass very lightly, asked questions, and um, it didn't really move very much. And there were six of us with fingers on the wine glass. And it was my turn. We went around the table. My turn to ask a question. I was a little embarrassed because I didn't really believe in what we were doing at the time. I was in my early 20s. And well, when The Exorcist came out. And
Yeah.
so I just silently asked my question, and which was, I'm going to say spirit guide. Is my spirit guide here with me? But I didn't know that term uh,
Mm-hmm.
50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it started to move very quickly, and it was a large dining room table, and it made a huge circle around the large dining room table. Everyone's fingers fell away because it moved abruptly and quickly, and except mine, and it circled the table and went to yes. And I know I didn't move that wine glass.
Ooh.
It moved on its own. It moved around the table on its own. So that kind of convinced me that, there's something going on that I don't completely understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving into this neighborhood 26 years now ago, things happened here that can't be denied.
Mm-hmm.
It caused me to write that first novel.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to document it. I just wanted to put it down on paper so that I would never forget it, and it was always there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and my husband and I even started going to a spiritualist church to try and get an understanding of what we were dealing with.
Wow. So what's happening in your house must be frequent enough to cause you to go seek out explanations.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Wow.
And in the neighborhood, not just our
Mm-hmm.
house. So as you can tell if you read the book, it's not just our house, but I'm most familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I do wonder, kind of like, how I know my neighborhood, I live here in Cincinnati, the neighbors all talk to each other. Like,
right.
just recently we have a very fat male possum that has been just terrorizing all the dogs on our street, and we sit and talk about it. Do the neighbors say, oh, by the way, this happened in my house and I think it was a ghost? Like, do they talk about it openly, or does it depend on the family?
Um, initially, uh, the neighbors have changed completely over the years. I mean, we've probably been here the longest, except for Tom and I. And younger people have moved in. And so initially, though, the way this came out, and I talk about it in the novel, I used it. We were sitting around a fire pit. This is quite a community. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
a neighborhood. And
Mm-hmm.
we were sitting around a fire pit, and after the May promenade, and people were talking about things that happened at their house. That year, our house was on the promenade, and several people came through our house that told me about the lady on the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, come on, certainly not. Um, well, she, among others, presented herself. I have never seen her. My
Mm-hmm.
husband has seen her.
Oh. Have your
Um,
kids seen her?
no, not her.
Okay.
But we have others.
Okay.
And uh, actually, a group that went through the ghost walk early on saw her on the steps during the ghost walk.
Wow.
So, I mean, a lot of people have seen her. I haven't. I have heard crying, though, in the hallway right outside this office. And then when I step into the parlor, it's more like sobbing. It's not a loud cry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Step into the parlor, it stops,
Mm-hmm.
but it's in the hallway. So, and I don't know if that's her or not.
Mm-hmm.
And she's one of many. And so it was that year at the promenade that all these people came through. This our house used to be a church,
Mm-hmm.
and women who came to church here mentioned the lady on the stairs to me when they came in.
Oh, wow.
A woman who still lives in the neighborhood that was a cook in this house first told me about the lady on the stairs. And it also used to be an office building, and someone that worked in the office building told me about the lady on the stairs. So there was a lot of independent um, verification of that,
Mm-hmm.
and that piqued my interest. And so I started researching the house.
Mm-hmm. Now, what? So you've talked about the lady on the stairs. What is she said to look like? Like, who do people think she is?
Well, that's what my whole first novel is about. We don't know who she is.
Mm-hmm.
I have, there are some possibilities. I
Mm-hmm.
personally think it's one of the Campbell girls.
Okay.
One of the sisters committed suicide, not in this house, but one committed suicide. Another had a very difficult time with Aaron, who lived here, and
Mm-hmm.
her father, who was very close to Aaron. Um, so it could have been Lelia, it could have been Fanny.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my guess. But, a lot of people have come through this place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for our listeners, what is a little bit of the history of the house you're in right now?
Well, it was built in the 1880s by George Tangman, who
Mm-hmm.
was a local industrialist. He had a rag company.
Mm-hmm.
And for his fiancee, Cora Hoagland,
Mm-hmm.
she was the heiress to Royal Baking Powder. I don't know if you remember. It used to be a huge company.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved Royal Baking Powder to Oyster Bay, New York. And
Okay.
so they sold the house to William H. Campbell, I think around 1885 or so. And William H. Campbell was the one of the richest men in Butler County. And he bought this house for his son, Aaron. He bought the house across the street for his daughter, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Bought the house on the corner, that large, beautiful Disney mansion, um, for Fanny, who never
Mm-hmm.
lived in the house. She rented it out. Uh,
Okay.
she's the one that committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And so he bought a home for each of his children.
Wow.
Then after, in our house, after Aaron lost it in a lawsuit to his nephew,
Mm-hmm.
and two of his sisters sued him. Um, it was owned by a variety of different people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if you want to go into the history. It's
Yeah, it's just it went through a lot of transition. Basically, it seems to have gone in and out of being a um, family home to, as you said, commercial. Was it ever a multifamily home? I know a lot of those homes did become apartments.
well, um, Ben Strauss, who was an entrepreneur, he had a clothing company in downtown Hamilton in the 20s and 30s,
Mm-hmm.
lived in the house. So three branches of his family lived in the house, one on each floor.
Okay.
And so it was all the same family, but
They all had their own spaces,
and they were
basically.
different couples.
Right. Okay. And then
Um,
there's
and
also
then
an
it became a
addition.
church.
Yeah, it did turn into a church.
It turned into the Pilgrim Holiness Church
Mm-hmm.
and the Chapel of Love after that, and Children's Diagnostic Center after that.
Okay.
So when we bought it, a lot of the first floor had been stripped of woodwork and stained
Oh,
glass.
that's sad.
Yeah. So it has a long history.
It does. And it also has the addition the roof has been altered.
Right. And that was around 1915.
Yeah. It makes it way more whimsical than the Italianette it was.
Right. Right. Yep.
So, yeah. Now that's really interesting though. So you have a lot of people who have lived and had significant events occur there, basically.
Right.
And so we have a lady on the staircase. What other ghosts are calling that place home?
Um, there's a man on the second floor. There's no
Hmm.
one, by the way, on the third floor.
Okay.
And that kind of tells me that after 1915, there's probably no one living here
Hmm.
from those families or
Okay.
during that time. Um, but there's a man on the second floor. Again, my husband has seen him. My daughter, that used to be her bedroom where he stays.
Mm,
Um, my children won't go upstairs at all anymore. Um,
I can identify with that.
and uh, so I don't know if the sightings on the second floor are all the same person.
Hmm.
Um, because there is the man in the back room, and my husband saw a military person. Our kitchen is upstairs,
Hmm.
standing next to because he had a military tricorder hat on, standing next to the refrigerator. A construction worker who was restoring a bathroom on the second floor had someone come up behind him. Um, and frequently, I have seen and heard a man that I thought was my husband, but he wasn't here.
Oh.
So calling my name,
Oh, wow.
uh, going down the hallway while I'm in the second floor bathroom, someone walking down the hallway I could see him out of the corner of my eye,
Hmm.
just like a shadow passing.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know if it's the same guy that's in the back bedroom
Hmm.
and I am clueless who it is.
Huh. That's
So
interesting. Yeah. Your poor daughter for being in a room and putting up with it being haunted for as long as she lived in it.
she first told me that there's a man in her bedroom, a
Hmm.
scary man in her bedroom, when she lived here with me.
Was he like a tall,
Oh.
shadowy kind of guy that looms?
She didn't say that. She just said there's a scary man who talks to me in the bedroom.
Ah,
And
man.
she was afraid to go in there.
Yeah.
And she's in her 30s now and she still won't go upstairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I grew up in a haunted house too. So that's why I understand exactly that
yeah.
kind of intense. You feel like you're being stared at the entire time when you're in your room where you should be comfortable. You feel
Yeah.
like you could be yourself, and instead, there's something watching you or talking to you. And you're just like, no, you're not supposed to be in my space.
I have to say, at the time, I thought it was her imagination. And
Mm.
until it happened to me, um, now I feel bad about it. I mean, I didn't believe her at the time.
Well, you believe what you experience in
Right.
life. Until you experience it yourself, you can't really understand. Yeah. Well, at least you believe her now, so you can
Well,
share
that's
that.
true.
Yeah. So, have you ever had anyone, a medium or anybody, investigate your house?
Someone came through once a long time ago, and I didn't go through with them because they didn't come until almost midnight. And
Ooh,
I'm
ooh,
not a late night
no,
person. And, it doesn't have to be midnight and
no,
completely dark, as we
no.
know from uh, the historical society. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be dark. And so I didn't go through with them. I didn't hear about any of the results. They didn't really get back to us.
Oh.
So,
Oh, I'm
uh,
sorry to hear about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be
Yeah.
interesting to have someone go through again. Now, Victor has been through this house before we started the ghost walk.
Okay.
And he sensed the man in the back room that my daughter, and then I kind of believed her.
Uh-huh.
Um, he didn't sense anyone on the third floor, and he could feel the woman on the stairs.
Okay.
He thought she was German, but I don't think.
Hmm.
Of course, there's a lot of Germans in Southwest Ohio, but
There are.
trying to think of who that could even be.
Hmm. It's an
Campbells were
interesting.
Irish, so it leaves them out.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, that's an interesting detail, though. It just helps.
Yeah.
Just any information helps. Wow. Well, that's an interesting house that you have. I
And
would.
I'm not afraid anymore. At first, I was terrified, but
Yeah. What drew you? Did the house call to you? Sometimes when I talk to people who live in haunted houses, they say the house called to me. I couldn't forget about it, and we put an offer in on it.
it
Did something?
did.
Yep.
It did. And at the time that we bought it, there were 3 of these mansions for sale. I
Oh
mean, it was
wow.
before the Renaissance really took off in this neighborhood. And um, one was Heaven on 7th. I'm glad I didn't buy that house. And the other one was our next door neighbor's
Hmm.
house. And this one, which was gutted. I mean, it really wasn't as nice as the other houses, but
Mm-hmm.
it was this one that spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, yeah, I think I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah, I think so too. You're very calm, and it helps with everything around.
Yeah.
Heaven on Seventh is way too active. Like just reading about it, I'm like, that is a very cool house. I would totally have my offices in there, but I'm the weirdo that could handle that amount of traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a bad experience for me.
Oh,
And so I can't remember if I think I put that in the book,
I
but
don't. I don't remember you mentioning your experience, but just reading about the amount of in vortexes basically. So Heaven on Seventh and the McKee Manor kind of go
yeah,
hand in hand because they're
right.
across the street from one another, and you seem to have a vortex in both. It's like a portal, and the entrance is in one building and the exits in the other, and they're crossing the intersection, which may be leading to all the accidents there. So
Oh, that could be.
yeah.
Right.
So there's spook. Oh my goodness. I can't tell you how many times I've been driving and I thought like I hit a raccoon or a squirrel or something, and it was not a living raccoon or squirrel, and I almost cause accidents like stopping too fast or
Mhm.
swerving or things. And I can imagine if you are driving down Dayton Lane or 7th Avenue, and you see somebody out of the corner of your eye and get spooked. Who
We
knows?
do have a lot of accidents at that corner. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there was a time when practically every week there was a wreck at that corner.
Oh, geez.
So, yeah, I mean, that quite possibly, that's a bad spot.
I wonder if somebody died there and never left and instead just shocks everyone who goes by it.
I don't know.
These are just all hypotheses I'm
Yeah.
throwing out here, but Dayton Lane's is a neat street. It's a name. It's an actual street, but there's also kind of a neighborhood. But the street used to be known as Millionaires Row.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And all the houses are fantastic. I just, as a history buff, I'm just like, that is cool. And that is cool. And that is cool. And as I had mentioned before we started the show, I had been in the Schuler mansion for a ghost hunt when it was still nigh optometry was still
Right.
there. So, and that was a neat house because it's a arts and crafts style, prairie
Yeah,
style house.
Craftsman.
Craftsman.
Yeah.
And I love it because that craftsman in that era was really lots of circles and curves, and the wood is fantastic in
Yeah.
there. And
It's beautiful.
I
And
like
now
it.
they're
Hmm?
changing it to a single family, and just Tom and Jennifer are going to live in that humongous mansion, just the two of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that what is it? The third floor is pretty active. I remember it being very active when I was there,
Mhm.
and we were having shadow activity, like shadow people walking around our group, and it was freaking out people. And
Yeah.
yeah, because that's that was a neat. It reminded me a lot of the Casper movie from the 90s. I don't know why. Just the activity. Nothing, no one in that building is going to harm anyone, but boy, oh boy, do they love to stun and surprise the living as they're walking through the place. Especially like the third floor, and then there's the first floor, not where the optometry office was, but it looked like kind of near the entrance area. There was like this little nook area,
Right.
and I remember going, "Hey, there's somebody here. I think it's a kid." So, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. There's a lot of activity there, but it's warm like
right.
family activity. It's not like Heaven on Seventh where it's just chaotic strangers
Yeah.
flying through.
Well, they do fly through there, and
They do
it's.
kind of fly through
I
there.
think they have a demon there. I do.
Oh man. Well, I don't want to say when you get that much activity, it does tend to attract other entities. I'm not going to say a demon, but
I'll
I've
say
run
a dark.
into jinn a lot. And jinn like to pretend they're demons, but they're really not. They're just like these trickster spirits that are elemental in origin. And they're just like, I'm so deep, dark, and scary. Look at me. I'm going to scare you. And then you're just like, no, you're a jinn. You're just this neutral entity that likes to spook people. So,
Well, I know Victor always told me they can't hurt you, because I was afraid when he first started going through our houses. It was unknown to me. He said
mm-hmm.
they can't hurt you, but in Heaven on Seventh, they cut me, so I had claw
No.
marks,
Well,
bloody
that's scary.
bloody claw marks, and as did my husband, who the following year took a group for a ghost walk there, and he came home and he had those same marks on his arm,
Yeah.
bloody claw marks. Now they did, did they hurt me? I don't know. They disappeared like before the day was out.
They,
Um,
I I'm not I haven't been in there so I can't ever really say. But yeah, that's still startling having that happen cuz
right.
we have so much in our society and culture. The mark of a 3, especially in a haunted location, does not have good associations. So I
Yeah.
can see why you'd be scared and startled. But Victor is right. They really can't actually hurt you. What they like to do if they're mean is like to intimidate, and they do that by staring and to creepily talking and being like the big black shadow entities. They're like, I'm so big, I'm
Yeah.
so scary. Like you have that at Waverly Hills, and you're like, you were human. You may have been 6'3", sir, but you're not 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that yeah, I go to a lot of haunted locations and talk to dead people. If you haven't caught on that yet,
Yeah.
um, but another location would be the other Benninghofen house, which is Christian Benninghofen.
Right.
Yeah, and he has another whimsical and wonderful mansion on Dayton Lane.
It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And it's
And
a single family again, isn't it?
well,
No, no, I'm wrong.
no,
It's a
unfortunately.
yeah, it's multi. It has a rental though.
It used to be the Rennicks lived there on the
Mhm.
ground floor and part of the second floor, and then they rented out some apartments. And then they made one of the apartments an Airbnb, and now the entire house is Airbnb.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
what kind of chaotic energy does that bring to Dayton Lane? just having new people there every weekend.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's positive. It's a very beautiful, positive house. And actually, Christian and his family um, were lovely people.
Mm-hmm.
And, actually, one of his descendants helped me when I was writing about his house in the book. And she's a lovely person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I can't imagine that there's, you know, anything negative going on there. It's a beautiful home. It's a beautiful Airbnb, and the spirits that are there are good people.
Yeah.
So,
Very warm family,
right,
cozy, I would almost say.
right.
So, for our listeners, we did a Benninghofen house episode a few weeks ago talking about our ghost hunt, but also the history. So, Christian is the son of Wilhelmina and just blinked out, but Benninghofen Sr.
Yes.
And this is his house that he built. Thank you, John. With his wife, Anna, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Wilhelmina is John Benninghofen's second wife.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if Christian.
Oh, he may not have been
uh,
her direct son. She could
right.
have been a stepmom. That's correct. That's right.
And
But
I'm not sure. I didn't look that up when I was doing my research.
mhm,
So
yeah.
exactly. I just learned in writing this book that he had a wife in Germany that he left in Germany. I had
Mm,
no idea. So I learned a
yeah.
lot through
Yeah.
research.
Yeah. And then suddenly the community, like, suddenly the history makes more sense and why things are named the way they are. But Christian took the business over from his father, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, and
Right.
then and built this house. And how many kids did he have?
Oh, I think three, but there were servants that lived in the house as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
oh, do you mean John or Christian?
Christian.
Yeah, I think he had three. I think he had, and I can't swear to this, I think he had two daughters for sure.
Mhm. Sorry, I'm looking up the chapter. That's that's why oh yes, the Wild West comes to Hamilton is the
Yeah.
chapter. And I liked this because as someone um whose mother is a fan of Annie Oakley.
Oh,
Yes, and I grew up with Buffalo Bill and Annie Oakley like not reruns, but my mom just would fangirl over all of that. She really loved the strength of Annie Oakley and how she was very take charge and everything. And the fact that there's a neighborhood, Oakley, in Cincinnati where Annie Oakley got her name, and we have a huge mural painted to her. I liked the Wild West comes to Hamilton because it really pulls those two very Cincinnati things together. And with um, the ghosts that have been seen on the balcony here, I believe. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about this story?
well, and when I talked to the descendant, she says, "Oh, I don't think that's true. My mom doesn't remember anything about that, and she
Mm-hmm.
lived in the house for a while. I think she would know." But the rumor is that there was a young girl whose bedroom was off that balcony. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a small bedroom, um, and she would sit out there, and as the parade passed by, it would come down Dayton Street because the Wild West show was at the fairgrounds, which is at the end of Dayton Street.
Mm-hmm.
And the parade would go by the Benninghofen house. There was a young man who admired the young lady on the balcony and climbed up the side of the house up to the balcony to see her. Now, Victor told us that.
Mm-hmm.
Victor saw that happening.
Mm.
The Benninghofen that that's not her last name, by the way, that I communicated with, said, I think my mom would remember a story like that.
It's
And
a pretty fantastic story.
yeah,
It's very romantic.
it is.
It has a romantic element to it, yeah.
And the Wild West shows, a couple of them for certain, came to Hamilton frequently,
Hmm.
regularly. And I mean, it's possible. Did it really happen? I mean, I try not to present these stories as fact, and
Hmm.
I leave it up to the reader
Hmm.
to form their own opinions about what happened or didn't happen. It's just a lot of it lines up with the history.
Hmm. Yeah. And Hamilton is such a big manufacturing center, especially earlier in the century and
Yeah,
later
right.
19th century. It'd be silly for these Wild West shows not to parade through and try to get as much really marketing. They were marketing tactics like, look who's here. We got Annie Oakley. We've got horses. We
Yeah,
got sharpshooters. And it wasn't just Wild Buffalo Bill, it was also um, Pawnee Bill,
right,
which
right.
I didn't know about until reading this book. I didn't realize there was competition, and being a Parks and Recreation fan, I'm now wondering if that's where we got Pawnee, Indiana from that show. But that's a different
Oh,
discussion.
no, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a beautiful house. And it's said to be haunted as well, besides just these romantic balcony meetings.
Oh, right. One of and this was validated. The young woman that appears in the house, in the library, there's the sensation of sadness in a woman in the library.
Hmm.
Well, one of the maids was electrocuted in the library.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of, corroborates that.
Yeah.
Um, and a friend of mine that lived in that house, she no longer does, of course.
Hmm.
She moved out of the district, but she saw a young girl sitting in the seat on the landing, the window seat on the landing, in like a white dress and blue ribbons, I think she said, and dressed for a party.
Hmm.
I'd have to go back and check to make sure I've got the colors right. Well, I found an article about Christian's daughter who had a birthday party at the house, and she had a blue lace dress and white ribbons, just
Hmm.
the opposite, and
Hmm.
long hair, just like my friend saw regularly sitting in the window seat there.
Yeah.
So, and she did die in the house. Um, can't remember her name off the top of my head.
Right. Yeah, Benninghoffen's daughter,
Right.
not your friend.
Oh, no, 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 no.
Yeah, just clarifying for our listeners there.
My friend
It's
is just fine
That's
teaching
good.
school.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, when you were describing that, I was thinking of the very late Victorian, early Edwardian dresses that the girls would wear with the huge ruffly collars.
Mhm.
You have the ribbons, and then you have the drop waist, and then you have a frilly skirt. And they would always be wearing either tights or stockings or maybe really high socks. And then her hair being done in huge ringlets with ribbons that were satin. And I could just imagine her on that windowsill from the way you describe her in the book.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
Um, well, and so that was their daughter, Elsa, I guess. It was Elsa, um, who had her
Yeah.
birthday party and was dressed the way my friend described her. So,
It's so funny that the society papers over 100 years later would help verify a ghost
oh,
sighting.
right.
I know. Those nosy little society papers.
I'll tell
So,
you, I I read every line of text I could find on these people.
mhm,
Sometimes you learn a lot even by looking at a classified, who then maybe gives you another name or
mhm,
another idea about what happened in this house.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
feel like a detective going through that.
It's so much. I find that bit very fun.
It is.
So, like, kind of reinforcing this idea just for our listeners, when I was writing about Riders Inn, which is in Painesville, Ohio, so right along Lake Erie, it's a 1812 inn. It's a stagecoach stop originally, and one of the wives of the man who established a stop mysteriously caught on fire and died in the building.
Oh wow.
And in the not Cincinnati, but around the Cleveland and Painesville newspapers, you don't really hear, there was nothing really written. Their marriage was written about when they got married, but in all that information, and you find like ads and stuff they put out, but not when Suzanne died. However, Suzanne's family was very wealthy from New York State, and in their society papers, right when she
Mhm.
died, they mentioned that the daughter of this man died by a fireplace accident, and that was Suzanne.
Oh,
And it was, so I had to go to New York State where her family was from to get the actual cause of death. It was a great detective hunt. I It was fun, I guess, interesting, enthralling.
yeah.
Yeah, but of course I am investigating somebody's relative's death, which is also
Yeah.
not it takes a lot of the wind out of the sails. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, but it is a lot of sleuthing. And those society papers and gossip columns went into a lot more detail than your traditional newspapers
Well, that
went
was the
into.
big news. Yeah.
And not a lot of them are saved. Like you have the Butler County Historical Society. I can't vouch for them, but I'm sure they have a few copies around in their archives.
Yeah.
But if you look at a lot of the larger digitized newspapers, those types of newspapers or society papers have not been digitized. You have to go to historical societies to dig them up if they
Right.
have them. So,
I know
um,
the Historical Society has all of those old Hamilton papers back
mhm.
to, I think she said, early 1800s
Ooh,
on
that's
microfilm
wonderful. Yeah.
in the basement. And they have a reader down there, and
Hmm.
visitors are welcome to. I always went to the Cummins Room at the library, which is the place to go to find, the history of Hamilton. I didn't
Hmm.
realize they had them there as well. Let's visit
Yeah.
them.
They're just fun newspapers to go through. I remember finding out that there's been one. I can't really vouch, but I know of one tornado fatality in all of Cincinnati. It happened in 1908. It was a man who was riding a cart with his mule through Observatory Avenue in Hyde Park, and a strong, what is suspected to be like an F0, F1 tornado went through Hyde Park. A tree fell and killed them.
Wow.
So that's my odd little history that I just got from reading this, not even a paragraph mention in, I think it was the Cincinnati Post.
Wow.
Yeah, from 1908.
Were you
So
researching something or?
I was researching, I believe, if that was that, I think I was researching Imogene Remus and George Remus for the murder at Eden Park.
Oh,
And just going into, I go very thorough into people's backstories, just trying
mhm.
to piece together why this happened, who these people were, giving a better, not just a caricature of like a gangster and his wife from Chicago. It was, they were real people, they have real family,
Right.
and what made up their personality. So, for our listeners, before I bring in Jen and Christina, you can catch all these wonderful stories plus many more. You go into this history of the Prohibition era of Hamilton as well. And you
Right.
touch on Ryan's Tavern, which I have been to as well, and a lot more history. And it's all in Haunted Hamilton, Ohio by Haunted America, and it's Shi O'Neill. So please pick up a copy. It's a wonderful book. I love reading it. So
Thank
thank
you.
you. So Jen and Christina, would you like to join us? Shall I add you? Whoop.
Hey,
Hi.
the best way to do this for the is this well sorry, I'm playing around. We have StreamYard now, so we're like trying to figure out what looks the best.
This is our second episode shy with StreamYard, so we're still
We're still
Working out the
tinkering.
bugs.
navigating. There we
Yeah,
go.
I think this might work best for a round table.
Is it?
I'm
Okay.
gonna have to see if we can download more options. That is one
Okay.
thing we'll be doing when we're on hiatus is figuring out more about StreamYard.
Yeah. All right. So, do you two have questions? I know, Jen, you're an aspiring writer.
Not aspiring, I am. I just
I am.
haven't published any novels.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
are a writer.
My degree is in creative writing, Shy. I tend to write creepy vampire stuff that
Oh,
is very violent. So I need to kind of I don't know, rethink my approach.
I don't
And
know if you need to. I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not, you know, but I think that there is an audience for everything. I have a
There
friend.
really
agree.
is.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I have a friend that has art in a new Hannibal art book,
Oh,
and she is part of a, Hannibal fan group, and these people love that show, and their
yeah.
Kickstarter raised like in the first couple of hours, like
Oh
some
wow.
crazy amount. So
That
Oh, wow.
that I loved that show. I
yeah,
was
well,
really
you should
sad when
join
it
their
was canceled.
you should join their fan art group.
Oh,
But
okay.
one thing that I had this was such an interesting interview, Shy. I think I would freak out if I saw some of the stuff you saw in your house and your daughter
Yes.
being afraid to go into her room. I
Mhm,
mean, that's pretty
mhm.
intense stuff. And Kat has me watching that show Ghosts, and I think if I saw a bunch of
no.
people in my house like that, I mean, I don't know how you would handle that.
Well, I have to admit, in the beginning, I was afraid to be here, and especially afraid to be here alone. Um, but I'm comfortable with it now. I mean, well, we've been here 26 years, and
Wow.
um, it's just part of my life. I lost that fear after the first few years. Um, and I don't honestly know if there's anything to this or not, but it seems like every October before, as we were preparing for Ghost Walk, it seemed like more and more things happened. Now, maybe I paid attention more. I don't know. But it seemed to be a lot more active, and I could count on something happening in October before Ghost Walk. So,
So did you just kind of ignore those experiences because of the fear? Like what experience was the one in your house that made you go, okay, I understand what this is now.
well, when I heard someone calling my name and I was the
Mm,
only one in the house,
okay.
That was creepy.
um,
Yeah.
So spooky.
Did,
and the shadow that
oh, uh-huh.
goes down the hallway in the second floor
Uh-huh.
when no one's home,
So what do
except
you do in those instances? Do you just freeze or do you have a conversation with them or
no, I don't talk to them. I don't.
yeah. Okay.
And well, the first time someone passed by the bathroom, I actually went out into the hallway because I thought it was my husband.
Hmm.
Um, but there was no one there, and
Wow.
I was the only one in the house.
Yeah.
So, um, And, so those were kind of spooky things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think I just became accustomed to unexplainable things happening. I just took it in stride.
Yeah.
Now, often there's a really strong floral scent
Mm.
in both of the
Mhm.
hallways, the
Wow.
hallway upstairs and the hallway down here outside the office. Outside the office also is where the sobbing occurred.
Mhm.
Wow.
But
So you actually hear sobbing, like more
yeah,
than once.
right.
Wow. I mean,
Is
that's
there a
incredible stuff.
is there a pattern to it?
And honestly, it's not that it happens all that often. It's only been a couple of times for the sobbing.
Mm-hmm.
The very strong smell happens frequently.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
I'm just not sure what. I mean, it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Like a
Uh,
lady's perfume,
oh, but really strong.
really strong.
Wow.
Okay, that's a
Um,
pretty often reported uh, early haunting type of thing. Like, yeah, it's just smell is such a powerful sense, and you tend to get a lot of florals or cigarette smoke. Like when Christina and I were at Benninghoffen Senior's house, we had unexplainable pipe smoke.
hmm.
Yeah, up in the second floor around where was it McLean, the first mayor of Hamilton?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, where
Brady
he where he is. I don't want to say lurks because that's not quite right, but um, his
McBride. It's
McBride, yes,
McBride.
yeah, and yeah, we got really, and it wafted into the room across the hall from there too, and it started. I smelled it, and then somebody else, and then suddenly the entire group was smelling it, and it was very clear pipe smoke, pipe
Hmm.
tobacco smoke, and people checked outside to make sure no one was outside immediately because it was people could be smoking outside. Cigarette smell goes far, but no, we couldn't find anybody.
Hmm.
One thing
Well,
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
One thing that I was really interested in was you talking about having a spirit guide. Do you still? I mean, that could be. We should do an episode on them because I'm very sure many people that listen would be curious to know how do you know you have one and how do you get one if you don't have one.
Or do we all have them?
We all have them. We all have spirit guides. Someone who's watching out for you that's assigned to you. And then we have other guides. I learned this in the spiritualist church. Like I said, I wouldn't have known that term at the time I asked the question with the homemade Ouija board, but we all have them, and it's a matter of learning to meditate and opening yourself. They're probably talking to me right now, and I'm not listening. So you have to have the presence of mind, and you can do that with meditation. It takes practice, and
I wonder if the idea of a muse is a spirit guide talking to you.
could be.
I mean, I know it comes from Greek mythology, but it's kind of along the kind of same parallels, I guess.
Yeah. I know when I do anything creative, I go into a zone. I go to a place. I'm not conscious even of what I'm doing. It's like I wake up and, oh, did I do that? I don't know if you guys are like that or not, but
there is a word. Isn't that called flow? I mean, that's like a term.
Flow. Yeah, they talk about it in the Pixar movie Soul a little bit that came out last year. Yeah, it's definitely when I'm writing. Yep, you can get into a flow or into your zone, and suddenly 8 hours have passed. You've eaten nothing and haven't left your attic room, and your husband is knocking on the door, wondering if you're alive. Yes, that has happened.
I have not experienced that. I mean, I do get in a flow, but I'm always very aware of what I'm doing. Like I don't get completely lost in it.
Oh, I get lost in my writing.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it comes. I don't know where those words come from. It's just they end up on the paper.
You might be a conduit.
Yeah, I mean, Elizabeth Gilbert wrote about that, and she's done a bunch of TED Talks about muses and where people get ideas and stuff, and it's a really fascinating topic. But like I said, I would love to do some sort of show in season 3 about spirit guides, because it seems like that's something a lot of people would like to know how to hear from. I mean, do people tend to ignore them when they aren't aware of them? Kat, you've mentioned that you have. Do you have a couple? Just one? Like, do you know?
Sorry.
Do you have like a chorus? Is it like a Greek chorus?
There's just like a group, I will say. And,
it's like a Greek chorus. It's like they sort of.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
It's always a party over here. It's definitely, there's one that I particularly use the most, and I gender him as he. I have since I was a little kid. But really, they don't have gender. But they will help at different times in different ways. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be the metaphysical moment with Kat again. So really, spirit guides, and a lot of people would know them really well as guardian angels, that term. They speak in very quiet tones in the back of your head, at least with me. So one of them likes to remind me, like, basically keep watch of the brood of dogs and the toddler that I have in my house and the antics they get into. So I may be doing something mundane, like making lunch or washing dishes, but I happen to be out of eyeshot of them. And I will get this little voice go, "You should really go check on Yeti. He's up to something." And I'll go, "Okay." I will go check on Yeti and see if he's up to something. And sure enough, every single time, that dog is up to something. Or it could be my son, or it could be one of the other dogs, or, hey, maybe a bird has just run into the house and its body is sitting in the driveway and you have to move it. But stuff like that. And, or you'll get ideas like, hey, maybe you can do this to this character in your manuscript. And then you can start working from that. It's very quiet. It's not frequent, except for the warnings. And I find that, like, hey, Yeti's eating a yarn ball. Maybe you should do something about that. I find if I ignore it, though, if I get very human and hubrisy and go, no, it's okay, it's fine, bad things happen. Like, Yeti eats a rope toy, like he did yesterday. Aww. And I could have prevented it, but I didn't. And then you're on rope toy watch to make sure his intestines don't get tied up.
Ooh.
Wow,
yeah.
That sounds
so
stressful.
Yeah. So with the spirit guides, they're always talking to you. But yeah, meditation helps clearing your mind, calming down helps a lot to be able to hear them. And it will be these never negative, I will say. I know I just used a double negative, but the thoughts should never be negative that pop into your head. The guardian spirits, guardian angels, spirit guides are never negative. They're always uplifting, or they're telling you of something's going to happen, like Yeti's eating a yarn ball. Maybe you should do something about it. That kind of thing. If they're ever telling you that you're not good, you should just jump off a bridge, you should end it all, or something like that, they're very
that's your
intrusive.
Dumb brain.
It's your brain, and go talk to somebody about that. That's not a spirit guide. It also isn't a demon. So just go seek help.
For me, it was depression.
Yes, depression, anxiety. Like, I have anxiety, so spirit guide works overtime a lot. But there's a lot of affirmation that way. So spirit guides are always positive. and they help out
I
if you
could guess.
ask.
I could see that could be like where you get your ideas and stuff, because they really
Yeah.
do just kind of pop into your head. And
Yeah.
I probably get too many that pop into my head. I don't know.
Okay.
Troy has always said he thought that I had, people have an angel and devil on their shoulder.
Yeah.
Troy always says that I have two devils, one on each shoulder, egging me on, saying,
Yeah.
"Do it, do it."
Yeah.
You may
I
want
would
to
have to
ask them
agree
to
with
tone
that.
it down a little bit and be like, it's great getting all this information, maybe not at one time.
So I have a writer's questions for Kat and Shy. I know when I write, I can often see the scene visually.
Mhm.
Well, in my head, not like out in front of me. But do you guys have that kind of same experience? Like if I can see it, and I mainly write fiction, so if I see it, then that helps me get into the flow of it. And then sometimes all of a sudden 2, 3, 5 pages are done, and
Yeah. I don't know if I would say that I see it. I've become a character in the story. I mean, I become
Gotcha.
part of the story and I'm living it when I'm
Wow.
writing.
Okay. That's
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, that is a really neat way of interpreting the
Yeah.
narrative. Yeah.
I find when I write characters, they kind of do write themselves. They kind of
Yeah.
like even with my webcomic, like the characters assert
Mhm.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I don't always predict who's going to be in the comic. It's like somebody steps forward.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I'm like you, Jen. I will see a scene
Mhm.
and I kind of write down the scene, illustrate who's in it,
Mhm.
and then pin it. And my job is to connect these different scenes together in an interesting overall arching narrative. And
Yeah.
the characters develop on their own through these scenes, basically, and they
Okay.
drive the scenes. So
I
there's
think I
some,
might need to take a spiritualist class, because I always have always felt like I've had a block even when I am creating things.
Mhm.
I don't meditate, and I'm a little scared to like open myself up to those things, but I think it might help with
Oh,
I
totally.
like,
art. Yeah.
yeah, get that flow moving, Jen.
Yeah,
Get that flow.
you need the flow.
We
I
need to
do.
unplug you.
Yeah,
I finally decided to start looking at houses seriously, because one of the neighborhood kids again was banging on my garage door. So I'm fed up.
Oh,
So I'm going to be concentrating a lot on that and packing the house and stuff like that, which I don't want to do. I'd much rather do fun, creative things. But
well, here there's a house that you can rent on Dayton Street that is
Where's
rather
Dayton?
large. Dayton Street, Dayton Lane
Mhm.
in Hamilton,
Mm.
the place that we've been talking about for the.
Oh,
Is it-
okay.
I don't know if
I
I
didn't
want
know
to
it
live
was
with a
on that
ghost,
street.
though.
That might be exciting, but you want to buy a house. Although, yeah,
I do. I do.
mhm.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm open to whatever. I just want to be left
well,
alone and be quiet.
sometimes creativity can happen when you're doing mundane things. I mean, one
Oh,
thing that a
yeah.
lot of writers do, and I don't know if Shy does this, some actually will record stuff. Like, I mean, all phones now even have a recording device. And so when you think of cool ideas, just record them. And
Mhm.
like some even have transcribing software,
Mhm.
so
Oh,
that you can use that later to like when an idea, because often, like, I know so many people that get really great ideas in the shower. There's
Yeah.
something about that running water and that sort of thing, or sleeping on it is a great way to get
Right.
ideas.
yeah.
I find when I get really tired, I will always stop working and just go to sleep, because
Mhm.
especially if something's not working out, because you're not going to work it out when you're that tired, and your
No.
brain will actually keep working on it. So when you work on it when you're fresh, it will actually start to work, because your brain has worked it out for you while you rest. And so
Yeah.
always listen to your mind and body when you're
Mhm.
coming up with stuff that's creative.
Yeah.
That's why I keep post-it notes in the bathroom.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And I will say my ideas come from listening to music while driving.
Oh,
Really?
interesting.
Yeah. So,
Mine
You know-
come when I'm bored and fed up with work. Like when I was working at Amazon, I was really pissed off that I had to be there because of my own stupid actions. But
That sounds like a story.
That does sound like a
while
story.
there and like tossing the packages where they needed to go, the whole time I was thinking about a story. Of course, it's still in the head, and I haven't written any of it. But
Yeah. So
yeah,
Shai,
I guess that's the mundane. Sorry, go ahead.
it's fine. You talked about your book that you wrote before Haunted Hamilton, Ohio. Can you talk a little bit about that? That one is fiction, though, based on history.
It's fiction based on real stories, real things. So it covers two time periods: the current, when based on the things that happened to us in this house, and the research that I did, and then it introduces you to the 1880s, early 1890s, as it goes through Aaron's story and the Campbell family story, which is, oh my goodness, I mean, it's just a lot of scandalous.
It was very dramatic reading about it from the Haunted Hamilton, Ohio.
A lot of the things that happen in the novel came from actual newspaper accounts in the 19th century. And so it kind of goes back and forth, and it relates the research that I'm currently doing to, and then it'll go back and it'll explain historically what was behind the research that I presented in the current period. So, it's about relationships in this family. It's about, it's very descriptive. So my style is not a narrative style, but it's descriptive and placing you in the time and place when it goes back to the historical part of it. So it talks about early in the family. It kind of stems around Fanny's suicide and goes back and forth, describing the relationships between the brothers and sisters, and talks about how Aaron went from the richest person in the county to the poorest person in the county. But I love it because I felt like I was a part of that story and part of that Campbell family. So it talks about all the women died early deaths. And one of the sisters, Lelia, was in the story, and some of this I embellished. I don't have, anything telling me it happened this way, but she was a little bit wild and had many sexual encounters. And in the story, she dies from an opium. She goes to an opium den in Dayton and dies from an overdose there. Doesn't get along with father, brother, any of her siblings. They kind of disown her. And and she died at a young age, and she really did. And one of the other sisters that sued Aaron for his money was married to a congressman and lived across the street from where I live, by the way. And she died in early death.
Mhm.
And her husband died in early death.
Wow.
And of course, Fanny killed herself, and it kind of all revolves around Fanny. And so, I mean, it's just the story is about that family relationship and
Yeah.
how the brothers and sisters, or the nephew and the sisters, sued um, the brothers for all the money and land, but they all ended up poor because they either died early or they lost their money. So it's a family story, but it's kind of scandalous. And
Wow.
I enjoyed it because I enjoyed writing about the period mostly. So the historical part of the book was the most fun to write. And the other is just based on things that happened to us in this house and researching it because of Victor's findings, you know.
That
Talk
makes me want to
about
read it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. It was a labor of love for me. I just wanted to get it down on paper because I didn't want to forget it. Was never going to publish it. People pushed me to publish it. And those that have read it said this needs to be a movie. I'm not making that up. And I wouldn't even know how to go about that. But
Wow. That sounds
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, is it self-published or do you have a publisher?
no, it's self-published.
Okay. Well, to go about making it a movie, first you need a publicist, and then you need a book manager. So those are the first steps. But while reading that part of the history, it sounds like something that would be Downton Abbey, for
Yeah, it
instance.
does.
It sounded just like Edwardian Ohio
Mm-hmm.
Downton Abbey. So lots of intrigue, lots of fortunes lost and gained,
Yeah.
families suing each other. And then was it Fanny that was married to the vaudeville manager?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and just that on its own is really interesting, and how her life ended up was really sad. So, but I also think one reason why you're so comfortable at the house now is you very much have become part of the Campbell family. You're
Yeah.
part of the dynasty now of this house.
Wow, that's cool.
I kind of feel that way too.
Mm-hmm.
Shi,
I
what
mean,
are you writing now?
well, I'm working on a book about the Volstead Act and prohibition
Oh,
Ooh,
wow.
that's a
in East
good one.
Hamilton.
Yeah.
Um, and it's based on it's based on three brothers actually that live down the street on
Okay.
Dayton Street.
Okay.
And, uh, and there's a lot of really interesting stories that revolve around that.
Is this fiction or nonfiction?
It's going to be fiction. I would much
Okay.
rather write fiction.
There's a lot more fun you can have with fiction.
It is. It's less stressful
Yeah.
because I don't have to worry about being correct about everything.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's going to say, well, that didn't really happen.
Right.
You know? And I love a good story, and I can really get into living this story if I write fiction. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's
wonderful.
next.
Yeah. Well, Jen, do you have any questions?
Sorry. No.
Okay.
I kind of want to invite myself over and ask if I could spend the night, but that's rude, so I'm not gonna. But yeah, I am gonna get your books, and I would like to read them. Yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah, because
I enjoy them. Honestly, I enjoy Millionaires Row Aaron's Descent far more than Haunted Hamilton, although I've gotten so many compliments and on Haunted Hamilton that I guess it's better than I thought it was. You know?
And Haunted Hamilton is nonfiction.
It's nonfiction. It's all
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, I really don't have proof of anything. I only have corroborating history.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
all ghost books would be like that. I mean, we've had a couple different authors that have written books about ghosts, and you know, a lot of that is what's you're kind of, it's circumstantial evidence that you're looking
right.
at, and you're trying to put stories together. But that being said, I mean, a lot of times there's a lot of compelling stories, and people feel a lot of the same things. So, I mean, Hamilton seems like it was a very interesting area. Partially because of the prohibition thing, where there was a lot of crime, wasn't there, in Hamilton? I think Kat was talking about that there was a lot of running of booze through Hamilton, and that there was a lot of, didn't you said it had something to do with the mob, and they took their thing to Las Vegas afterwards? That was another episode.
Oh,
You
yeah.
talked about that with Remus, I believe. Was it Remus?
Yes, sorry about that interruption. My son decided to walk into the room. It's past his bedtime, so anyway, had to put him back to bed. Yeah, so I'm sorry I missed whatever you were saying, but yes, there were you had the bootleggers going through Hamilton, Ohio. It was some of George Remus's whiskey distilleries were around this area up to Fairfield along the Indiana border. And then you also had John Dillinger had a hideout here.
Right. On
So
4th Street.
yeah, on 4th Street. So, and I also have a puppy below me eating my chair.
Well, I think that this has been a really I really enjoyed your interview, Shai. It was very interesting stuff. It makes me want to learn more about Hamilton and go up there more and check it out. You know, it's so close, yet I feel like it's something I've only been to the downtown area like 2 or 3 times, and all the time I've been here, and it just sounds so fascinating. The history and the hauntings and that sort of thing. So I think I definitely will be doing more tours of that area.
Good.
And I guess, do you want to tell us your socials? Where can we find you if we want to see your future writing and that sort of thing?
Well, right now I only have a Facebook presence, mainly because I haven't learned how to put this up on Instagram, but yet my son promised to help me, and hasn't helped me yet. So it's Shi O'Neill -author on Facebook. One of you actually started following me. Maybe it was
it was me.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. And also, thank you for following the Cabinet of Curiosities group.
Oh yeah, I had to. And that's all I have right now, but I'm working on it. I just need, and you know what? I'm a retired IT executive, but all of this has happened since I retired. So, all these social platforms weren't really around.
You're better off not being on them. It's a huge time suck. It's a full-time job trying to promote yourself on those things.
Oh, you're telling me.
Is.
Oh yeah. My goodness. Yes.
We've just been through. That's why we're taking a couple weeks off. We've just been through the social media tornado.
Yes.
They call a Kickstarter.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, it's helpful though to sell your own books, because if you're writers, you know this, the royalties, you're not going to get rich off those royalties unless you have a bestseller. But if you can sell your own books, and especially if you can self-publish and sell your own books, it's just, you end up making a little bit more. You're still not going to get rich, but so it helps to sell them if you have a social presence.
Yeah,
right.
agreed.
Yeah.
And this is a unique time where I think that the individual creator is empowered more than they ever have been before, because so
Right.
many of the traditional ways to get writing from people, all the gatekeepers are kind of gradually falling away because
Mhm.
just by the way things are restructuring. So it's kind of cool. It's an interesting time to be a creator, an exciting time.
Right.
Yeah, which is why we.
Exactly.
What convinced me is when Stephen King started self-publishing, I thought,
Yes,
well, must be okay for me.
yeah.
When did he start doing that? I'm kind of out of the loop on the world.
Oh, a long time ago.
Oh,
Probably maybe 10 years ago, he started
okay.
self-publishing.
Well, I think a lot of people are now. You can directly reach your, the people that are your fan base in
Right.
in a way that you could not before, and so that's been a game changer.
Yeah.
And that's one reason that Kat and I started a publishing company.
It
So,
is. It is.
When you
But
control your own destiny.
mhm.
So, and I honestly, I write for pleasure.
mhm.
And if it sells, great. If it doesn't sell, I already got my enjoyment out of the project. So
Mhm.
um,
There's
it's
something to
more,
be said for creating something for you, as
yeah,
opposed to, there's so many people that when they try to create something, they want to think of it as sort of like, how can I monetize this,
right,
when I think there's something so wonderful about doing creation just for you.
right. Well, that's what I enjoy.
Mhm.
It becomes a job otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus, your readers can tell when you're enjoying the process versus if you're just trying to hit certain benchmarks to be popular. So it telegraphs really clearly to
Mhm.
readers.
Yeah.
And on that note,
Yeah,
we hope that many writers and artists will, send us their stories for the next issue of Cabinet of Curiosities. We're
exactly.
really looking forward to people submitting. Kat can't wait to read your submissions.
Hmm.
And it's a very exciting time. So if you're a creator listening to this, why not submit when she gets the dossier up in January? We really want to see your stories. And we also want to hear your haunting stories.
Yes.
I know it's kind of, Shy, you've raised the bar here as far as personal haunting stories. Oh my gosh. But if you grew up in a haunted house, or if you've had some sort of paranormal experience, or if you've seen a UFO, or, I saw a rocket in the air a week ago.
Yeah.
And I asked about it on Facebook, and it was like, it was obviously something being shot in the air, but it was a couple hours before the SpaceX thing.
Hmm.
And some other people said they saw it. It was like in the eastern sky.
Hmm.
So if you've seen something weird or had an experience, email us. It's hometown haunts. No, hometown.
Hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com.
Yes, it's in the show notes. We hope everybody writes us over the hiatus, and we'll replenish our haunts stores to read for the next episodes. So,
So, on that note, thank you everyone for joining us with this season of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, the Hometown Haunts podcast. You can send us your hometown haunt at hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. And also, you can keep up with us on social media at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and join our Facebook group. And don't forget to join Shy's while you're there. So, yeah, he's just discovered he can see himself.
have a
All
great
right.
holiday,
Have a
everyone.
great holiday,
Thank
everyone.
you.
We'll see you
Happy
in
holidays.
2022.
Bye.
Bye.